Tete Rasta. I wanted to talk about this particular subject on Sunday, but I needed to organize myself a little bit better. Today, this evening, I want to talk to you about dementia and also just highlighting on safeguarding of vulnerable adults. Ndiko ku office kwango. A lot of you will know that I'm a healthcare professional. So I wanted to talk about this because it's really important when we start looking at how do we understand people, other people, how can we get the best out of our elderly community, and how can we really assist them. So when I get to work, I just do a little bit of background because some people were asking me, "Yeah, Grace, what do you do?" Blah 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 blah. So when I get to work, I've got my headsets. They're in this little pouch. I sit and there are two computers. I put on my headsets, and then I plug this one into the phone system that's there. It's integral. It's part of the national grid. And then I switch on and log on the two screens. One has got the demographics. One has got all the information that you need in order to speak to the patients. So all I do is take calls. So some of the calls come from people who are not paramedics or experienced clinical advisors. And then there's a queue. So we're dealing with the queue. But my favorite calls, they come from the elderly. Now, I wanted to talk to you about dementia because some people will be thinking, why this is such a dry story? But it's not really, because when my mom was not very well in her later days, she actually kind of wasn't thinking very well. And one of the battles that we had was trying to support her and be as loving as we could be. We could see that was our mom, but something inside wasn't working as it should. She couldn't make the connections in certain things. So I don't think my mother had dementia, but there was an element of severe confusion, which made it very difficult to access the individual. So you can read into it the way that you want to. I'm giving you total and absolute permission. Aida, maskwera seva komai wandaskwera ango mningina. So dementia, it is becoming increasingly forgetful, particularly if one is over the age of 65. So 65 is usually the marker, although nowadays you have early onset of dementia. Now, I'm doing this in particular, as you know, that things are really heating up in Zimbabwe. And I think it's important for people to be able to understand what is dementia and also to be able to use it in the right context as you will and as you wish, so that you can be more informed in terms of some of the decisions that you're making. So as we get older, we are all prone to dementia. I think in the West, it comes to them much quicker. I'm not sure why, but in Africa, in particular in Zimbabwe, there's always people around, there's children. So you're stimulated, you've got your little garden and, people, it's a very social community. In the West, the tendency seems to be a little bit higher. And I know that the sense of isolation, particularly in older age, is increased. So what are the common issues that people see in dementia? You see memory loss. So forgetfulness. Some people have got short-term memory loss. Some people have got long-term memory loss. So if people have still got the capacity with short-term memory, but if they have the capacity with long-term memory rather, but their capacity for short-term memory is diminished, it can be terribly confusing because they will be able to tell you things that happened in 1979 or 1965, or even things that happened in 1930 with great detail. But ask them what they had for breakfast this morning. They are clueless. And sometimes when it's really quite severe, you turn up to see your loved one and they don't even recognize you. They don't even recognize that you came to see them yesterday. So those are the things that can be particularly vexing for people that have got dementia and those that care about them and those that love them and those that want to be with them. Because also you feel rejected in that process. The thinking speed of that individual will be greatly diminished as well. So where someone was quite agile, someone was quite intelligent, visually everything is the same. And if the long-term memory is still in situ, and also their voice is still the same, you can get a bit frustrated. And their mental agility is also not so great, and their language. And per language as well, because they get impatient with everybody else not understanding them, they can also become quite irritable and angry and agitated and insulting and sarcastic, all the things that you really don't find attractive, is the kind of person you don't want to be hanging around with. But because they're your blood relatives, or there's somebody who's important in your life or in your country, you have to find the capacity in yourself to try and understand, to try and be available to the best of your capability. And their understanding is also affected. So a lot of the calls that I get, you're talking to the individual, you've got good intentions, but there can be a sense of paranoia, kufungira, things that are not. And also the judgment is also impaired. And controlling their emotions is extremely difficult. And sometimes they can get quite aggressive and physical and hit out at people. A lot of people will know that elderly people want to think I'm a pampa, which are the incontinent pads. So when you get to a stage where your loved one is no longer able to look after themselves in terms of managing their bowels, managing their bowels or managing their toileting, there are these beautiful pampers. They're like pads or baby pampers. Buy them for them so that they wear them. And then they're less likely to have accidents, and it's not embarrassing, and they can manage their and have their self-respect. Hanzi naida mudze ne anjadzi dzedu dzinonwa kunge fish kuti there is also alcohol-induced dementia that can affect anyone. I have known some who have that as early as 30 years of age. Yes, Ida is also another healthcare professional. Thank you, Muningina. That is also really very useful. So a doctor will be able to do an assessment, look at memory loss, and also look at strategies of whether the individual can stay in their own home or whether the individual needs to be somewhere in a place of safety. So what they are looking for is increased difficulties with tasks and abilities that require concentration and planning. So somebody with dementia should not be in a high-profile job. Somebody with dementia should not be in a position where they're making decisions that impact the lives of other people. They can also be prone to depression because they're also losing a sense of who they are. Anybody who has dementia has a sense of remembrance, and they have a sense of loss, and that can make them feel quite depressed. And they have periods of mental confusion. So confusion is when you are not orientated to time, place, and person. Ask them what's today's date. They will give you some crazy old date. Ask them what's your name. Ask them who's the president or who's the prime minister. They won't be with it. So that's something that you want to bear in mind, especially when you start seeing signs such as the ones that I'm talking about. And they find difficulty, they have difficulty finding the right words. So that is insofar as dementia, what are the symptoms and so on. Anzi Natava RGM. There have actually been speculations as early as let me have a look at this. As 2005, I tend to read the Telegraph newspaper in 2005. This one is a little bit dodgy because it was written by somebody who the president of Zimbabwe does not like, called David Blair. And he wrote, it's an article on the 10th of June, 2005, that President Mugabe was accused yesterday of displaying senile dementia when he boasted to Zimbabwe's parliament that great strides were being taken towards economic recovery. That was as of that time. I mean, dementia is actually a medical condition. So if somebody is going to be told that you have dementia, it will actually be a diagnosis that a doctor can conduct. Most people who are in the health field will be able to see signs of dementia and can point you out in terms of the things that are prevalent. The other things that are important to note is that there's a difficulty of finding words and difficulty with numbers or handling money in the shops or changes in personality and mood. And those are the biggies. And also, a lot of the time when I get calls at work, people with dementia tend to have a lot of falls. You know, they just fall without any particular reason. They just fall. You know, they're elderly and their skeletal system is obviously not as agile as it was before. And Natendai, how about cannabis? Can it be any juicing agent? Can you furnish me on this one. I certainly will, Tendai. I'm going to share that with you outside of the group, because what I really wanted to do was to focus on the elderly. But I can certainly look at conditions that are induced by drugs, because that's a big problem in our society. So now we know what a person who has dementia may do or may not do. Now I want to move on to some of the systems that I work with in the United Kingdom that are particularly helpful, and I hope in Zimbabwe they have them. There is a service called Safeguarding of Vulnerable Adults. So whenever it is established that someone has got this condition of dementia, what we have to recognize is that there are some people who may misuse or abuse them, because maybe they don't recognize it, or they just think, game on, I've got my chance. So there can be concerns of abuse, concerns for reasons for concerns, and also if they've got social care needs. So physical abuse, people with dementia tend to get assaulted. Vanoroa, nai. There's some stuff on YouTube about our beloved president being assaulted. You can go to YouTube and find that. I'm not saying anything in particular. I'm just commenting on what I saw. Sexual abuse. Some people get sexually abused. I don't know who would sexually abuse an elderly person. Emotional abuse is a big one. Saying unkind words, being very, very unfriendly, losing your temper, because their behavior is really difficult to manage. Neglect as well. You don't feed them. You don't cook for them. Things like that. And because sometimes when people have got dementia, they say the most unpleasant things, it makes you, if you've got a high ego status, it makes you repel them. And then, or to think out, let me pay them back and be unkind. But you're actually doing a disservice, because someone with dementia, they're not willfully being horrible. It's a condition. It's just like diabetes. It's just like if you fracture your leg, you are going to have certain capacities that are taken away from you. Domestic abuse also happens when someone's got dementia, potentially. Organizational abuse, so taking over their roles, things that concern them, especially where people have got money, assets, or responsibilities. When someone has got dementia and others who are in their circle do not declare this, they could basically take over their operations and run things while they just use that individual as a puppet. Hans Nahi, thanks Tete. I guess this is really a good discussion, especially to our African society, because vakwegura vedu tino kurumidza kufungira kuroiwa nekunangana uroi mumamisha nekuda kwekushaya ruzivo. Yes, oh, you are so right. Because that's the paranoia that sets in, and also because they are acting very strangely. Sometimes here in the UK, you get calls where an elderly person has been wandering around, trousers right at the bottom of their ankles, akapfeka pampa, and they could be wandering around right in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. Now, in our African context, people will be saying witchcraft, because our elderly people, they tend to be a little bit smarter, so you can't really discern dementia as we would over here, because it's heavy. So I really appreciate that, Heath. And Natendai, wow, this is so nice. Keep it coming. Where were you all this time? I was in the making tonight. And I'm not going anywhere. So coming back to the other concerns for abuse, financial abuse is another big one, where someone can take the money of an elderly person, or my assets ake, or isolate them from their friends and families, so that person is almost like a prisoner. Because when someone is confused, or they have dementia, they're like a baby, and you can pretty much do anything with a baby. They might voice, but and so on. So it's a real big one. Let's have a look. Modern slavery, vanogona kushandiswa, make them clean the house or do certain things for you, and self-neglect. They tend not to look after themselves as well as they ought to, or they used to. And this is where their frustration comes in, because maybe he wants to button up his shirt, and they're shaking and they can't do it. So there are always physical signs that you see when someone is vulnerable and they've got dementia or they're elderly. There might be marks of abuse. They might cower away. My stories out there may be inconsistent. There's behavioral and developmental signs. So that's where you actually see that they're very different from how they used to be. And also other people may actually say there's something wrong, or the person themselves may actually say, I'm confused. I know that things are not right. So those are all useful information that you must take on board so that you'll be able now to say, Kochi, and listen. Don't put words into the person's mouth. Just be quiet and listen. Be patient. Okay? Hans na Aida, what you're saying is exactly what I said is coming, especially na RGM. I think people are now using him to do their evil thoughts. That's a thought. Also, people may use drugs or alcohol or misuse it so that they kind of perk up, or kutonwiswa drugs nema alcohol, because the person who's in that state of inebriation is less likely to resist anything that the perpetrator wants. And also the mental health issues, they come in, the forgetfulness, the paranoia, depression, all sorts of things. I could talk about this all day. Mental health is quite a broad area, but what we know is that people with mental health issues, they tend to be judged and stereotyped. So it's a really delicate one. So kana mchiziyamuna ane dementia, just be tender and loving and kind to them. Here in the UK, which is something I would like to see in Zimbabwe, we look at does the person have increased care needs? So are there any special provisions that we are supposed to do for them? So negative phone to check within a conversation of 10 minutes. Yes, do they have no package whatsoever? Or are they refusing treatment? And also they can be at risk of fires, because anogona stove auto and achinoita zvaanoita kwete zvangu inini zvokupisa mazondo because I'm on Facebook. And they can also tamper around with things that they're not supposed to tamper around with, or they might even come into the house and leave the door unlocked, and allow people to come in and exploit. So this is a lot about dementia. I just thought I would put it out there because I think kune vanonzwisisa vari kunyatsobata, network iri kunyatsobata kuti zvinhu zviri kufamba sei panapa. So when we now deem that somebody is a vulnerable adult, we send a referral to social services, and then the doctors can come in and do an assessment. So this is something that's really important. I don't know whether the doctors in Zimbabwe can finish us whether people have these assessments. Vano check capacity. Now capacity is to check whether I'm with it, whether I've got the capacity to make decisions about my finances. Do I have capacity to make a decision whether I want to have treatment or not to have treatment? Do I have capacity to say I'm no longer independent, so I can't live by myself, I need support, I need to be somewhere else? Do I have capacity to actually recognize it's too high profile, therefore I need to step down so that somebody else can do it? And what you find with people that are vulnerable, those around them are pushing them to continue working or to doing certain things, because as long as they're a lame duck. One of the key areas of support that's put in place is somebody as an appointed person, somebody who legally then deals with their affairs. So what that means is, even Karandine Mathaza Angum Bank, this appointed person now can make decisions about how my money comes in and goes out. Oti chenda ku bank uno sign a check. Unachitoshandiswa sechikwambo imi zvakapresa. And so this is the thing that, inini zvangu, I don't want to grow old in this country. Kusango kwatiri. And I would urge all Zimbabweans in particular, but everybody in general, to have an exit strategy, because you don't want to be in a nursing home. And I always just wondered, really, whether we're going to get to a point where people will say, it's dementia, it's not anything else. Obviously, people's personalities and their previous actions, they are telling, but there comes a point when illness sets in, so certain things have to be evaluated with the knowledge and understanding. So that's why we went to school. And pano network iri T. Aiwa ndafara nazvo. I don't know kuti pane vanhu vada kubvunza here mibvunzo so that ndo